Right now, somewhere in your body, something is performing, not visibly, not loudly, but constantly. A low hum of calculation running beneath every conversation, every decision, every glance in the mirror. Your brain is always asking the same silent question, how am I doing? And the answer to that question is costing you more than you have ever been told. But what if that question could stop? What if there were moments, real, measurable, physiological moments, when your brain simply stopped keeping score? What happens inside you when you have nothing to prove? The answer is not what you expect. It is not peace. It is not emptiness. It is something far older, far stranger, and far more powerful than either. Start with what your brain is doing right now. At this exact moment, a network of regions deep inside your prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate cortex is running what neuroscientists call social evaluation. It is monitoring how others might perceive you. It is calculating status. It is comparing your position in the invisible hierarchy that your ancient brain still believes you live inside. This is not a modern invention. This is not caused by social media or office politics or competitive culture. This is a survival mechanism that is hundreds of thousands of years old, and it never fully switches off. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA spent decades mapping what happens inside the human brain during social interaction. What he found was startling. The same neural regions that process physical pain also process social threat. Being judged, being excluded, being seen as lower status, your brain responds to these the same way it responds to a wound. The threat is real, the pain is real, and the vigilance your brain maintains to avoid that pain is constant. This is why status exhausts you in ways that physical work does not. When you lift something heavy, your muscles tire and recover. But the social monitoring system does not rest. It scans the room at the dinner party. It replays the meeting that went wrong at 2 a.m. It rehearses what you should have said, calibrates what people must think of you, runs probability estimates on whether you are liked, respected, needed. All of it invisible. All of it draining. Think about the last time you were genuinely unobserved. Not alone in a room with your phone. Genuinely unobserved. No audience, real or imagined. Maybe hiking somewhere so remote that no one knew where you were. Maybe sitting in a car in a parking lot for a moment before going inside. Maybe a single minute between waking and remembering who you were supposed to be that day. In that space, something shifted. You probably felt it without knowing what it was. That shift has a name, and it changes everything about how you understand yourself. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent 30 years studying what he called optimal experience, the states in which human beings feel most alive, most capable, most themselves. He called it flow, and one of its defining characteristics, across every culture and every activity he studied, was the complete suspension of self-consciousness. The athlete in flow does not think about how the crowd sees them. The musician in flow does not hear the audience. The carpenter, the surgeon, the climber, in the deepest moments of their work, the self-monitoring system goes quiet, and something else comes forward. Csikszentmihalyi described this as the paradox of control. In the moments when you stop trying to manage how you appear, you perform better, think more clearly, and feel more real than in any other state. The system that was supposed to protect you by keeping you vigilant was also, quietly, the system that was holding you back. But flow is not the only way this happens, and it is not the most ancient. For most of human prehistory, your ancestors lived in small bands, groups of 20 to 50 people who knew each other completely. There was no performance in those groups because there was no audience of strangers. There was no resume. There was no reputation to manage across multiple social contexts. There was only the group, and within the group you were already known. Your skill at making fire was already established. Your courage or your caution was already understood. Your place was not something you had to negotiate every day. It was something that existed, that had been witnessed, that required no performance to maintain. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford spent years studying the size and structure of human social groups. His research suggested that the human brain evolved specifically to manage relationships in groups of around 150 people, now famously known as Dunbar's number. But within that number, the innermost circle, the people your brain trusts completely, is much smaller, around 5. And with those 5, something fundamentally different happens. With the people who already know you, who have seen you fail and stayed, who have heard you say something wrong and understood anyway, who do not need you to perform because they have already decided, the social monitoring system dramatically reduces its activity, not because you have turned it off deliberately, but because the threat it was designed to detect is genuinely absent. You are not being evaluated, you are being witnessed, and those are not the same thing. This is what your brain feels when you have nothing to prove. Not relaxation, exactly. Not comfort in the ordinary sense. Something more precise than that. A withdrawal of the low-grade vigilance that runs beneath everything else. A quieting of the calculation. And in that quiet, things become available to you that the noise was blocking. Research from neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University suggests that the brain is not a passive receiver of reality, but a constant predictor, always building models of what is likely to happen next, always running simulations, always preparing. And a significant portion of that predictive energy, in most people most of the time, is devoted to the social world. What will they think? What will happen if I fail? What does this expression mean? What is my position here? When that energy is freed, when the social prediction machine goes quiet, it does not simply disappear, it redirects. Barrett's work suggests that the brain in a genuinely low-threat social environment reallocates its predictive resources toward other domains: problem-solving, pattern recognition, creative connection. The processing power that was defending your status begins instead to explore, to make unexpected links between ideas, to access memories and associations that the vigilance was too loud to hear. This is why your most original thinking rarely happens in meetings. It is why the idea arrives in the shower, or on the walk, or in the conversation with the one person in front of whom you have never needed to be impressive. The system that generates genuine insight and the system that monitors social status are competing for the same resources. And for most of your waking life, status wins. Your ancestors did not have to choose. They lived inside the circle of the already known. They did not need to prove themselves to strangers, because strangers were rare, and rare encounters with strangers were treated as high-threat situations, requiring a different kind of attention. The low-hum social monitoring you experience in every modern interaction, at the coffee shop, in the office, at the school gate, online, would have been, for them, a signal reserved for genuine danger. You have inherited a system designed for occasional use. You are running it continuously, and the difference between those two states is enormous. What happens when you stop? When you are genuinely, physiologically, no longer in performance mode? Studies of experienced meditators offer one answer. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer at Brown University found that when practitioners reach deep states of present moment awareness, the brain's default mode network, the same system responsible for self-referential thought, social comparison, and status monitoring, shows a dramatic reduction in activity. And in that reduction, practitioners consistently report the same thing: not bliss, not detachment, a feeling of being fundamentally themselves, of having arrived somewhere they did not know they had left. That arrival is not mystical. It is neurological. It is your brain, for perhaps the first time in hours or days, operating without the weight of the question, how am I doing? And in that state, something surfaces that the question was obscuring, a quality of attention that is not divided, a capacity for presence that is not performing presence but simply being present. A self that is not the self you show but the self that exists when showing is no longer required. You have felt this. You know the conversation where 2 hours passed like 10 minutes, where you forgot to check your phone, where afterward you felt more alive than you had in weeks. You know the work session where you looked up and the light had changed. You know the walk in the place you love where for a stretch you were not narrating your own life to an imagined audience, but simply living it. These were not accidents. These were moments when your brain briefly received the signal it was designed to operate with more often. You are safe here. You are known here. You have nothing to prove here. The tragedy is not that these moments are rare. The tragedy is that you have been taught to see them as side effects, pleasant interruptions in the real business of managing your reputation, building your image, maintaining your position, when in fact they are the signal. The rest is the interruption. Right now, somewhere in your body, something is performing. It has been performing your entire adult life, in rooms full of people who are also performing, none of you quite able to stop. But somewhere underneath that performance, underneath the calculation and the calibration and the constant quiet question of how you are doing, there is a brain that evolved for something different. A brain that knows, at the level of the ancient and the cellular, what it feels like to be already known, to be witnessed instead of evaluated, to operate without the weight of the question. And when that brain is finally allowed to rest from the performance, even briefly, what it produces is not nothing. It is the clearest version of everything you actually are.